Alright, in this tutorial we're going to be learning how to import a 3D object or an FBX file into TouchDesigner. We're going to add this kind of cool smoke effect. We're going to be dealing with shadows and this camera movement. So the first thing you're going to want to do is head to the link in the description below and download this Nissan GTR from Sketchfab by Stephen Gray. So we're just going to use this just as an example. You can more or less use any FBX file as long as it's not too big. You can see down here on the left, we've got triangles and vertices. Try keep things sort of under 100k triangles, because you'll start. TouchDesigner is designed for sort of real-time, 3D graphics and image manipulation. It's not designed for rendering huge, highly detailed scenes. So we want models that aren't too complex. So once you've downloaded that model, you can download it just by clicking download 3D model here. And then you'll see it says FBX original format. We want to use FBX. There's other file formats I think you can use, but we're going to stick with FBX for now because I know that's compatible. So hit download, and then we'll get a file just like this. And once you've downloaded that, open it up in Explorer, I guess, assuming you're on Windows. Or if you're on Mac, it doesn't matter either way. You're going to want to double click it, or in Windows right click and go extract all. So then you'll get this Nissan GTR folder. You want to double click on that, go to the source folder, and then there'll be another zip file in there called Nissan GTR Nismo. Right click and extract all, or double click it depending on the operating system you're using. And then you're going to see inside that Nissan GTR Nismo folder, Nissan GTR Nismo FBX. So you're going to want to go and open up a new instance of TouchDesigner. Remember to hold right click to select all the nodes, and then hit the delete key. Then we want to simply drag that FBX file right into TouchDesigner, just into the network editor like this. And as you can see, the model is sort of inside the network editor, and it's sitting in a container. So if we double click that and zoom in, you can see the model is made up of a bunch of separate pieces. Now we're not going to mess with this for obvious reasons. We're just going to scroll out until we can see our container here. Now, whenever you've got a 3D object or some geometry in TouchDesigner, there's 3 important things you need to add in order for this to show up on screen, basically. So hit Tab, or you can right click and go Add Operator. But I'm just going to hit Tab for now, and then click on Comp. Now, the 3 things we need are a camera, a light, and a render top. Now, a little trick for when you're importing, or for when you're adding, you need to add a bunch of operators at once, is you hold the Control key down, and see if I hit camera, it keeps this, I'm still holding Control down, but it keeps this operator create dialog sort of up. Then I can keep holding Control, hit light, still holding Control. Now I'm going to let go of Control, because this is the last operator I want to add. So we've got our light, we've got our camera, and those came from the comp panels. And now we're in the texture operators, and I'm going to select render. Now grab your light. I tend to put my light under the 3D model, and I just drag my camera up like this. Now we can kind of see something happening in here, but it doesn't look like the camera or the light are sort of lined up properly. Now, in order to see what's on screen, in the background, remember you can hit this blue display button, and that shows up sort of what's currently selected. So remember, let's add a node, a null on the end of this renderer. So you can right click on there, hit null, we'll chuck that in. Now I just want to show you guys something. So you can press this blue display button on any number of texture operators, but you see every time you sort of select to display a node, it displays it in the background just next to the other one. So you can have a dozen of these things all in the background, but it starts to get a bit hard to sort of see what you're doing. So I'm going to unclick the display button on render, and that's just sitting on our null. Now let's click the geometry in the middle here, the Nissan GTR, and let's rescale this, because we can kind of see the model is, we're sort of stuck underneath the model here. What you can do, a little trick, is to, on the bottom right hand corner of the geometry, you can hit this viewer active, and then use your left mouse click, and you can kind of look around, sort of see what's going on, right? So I'm going to untick that. Now that only moves the model within that container preview. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the scale of this model. If we go over to the parameters and we change the scale to say 0.1, hit the tab button, 0.1, hit the tab, 0.1, press enter. Now, okay, the car's still a bit big, and basically, in order to sort of get the camera, this render node here is simply displaying this camera. You can see in the parameters of the render top, camera's cam 1, that's cam 1 there. Now if we click on the camera and go over to our parameters, and remember, if we left click, hold down, and then use the left and right while we're moving the mouse, move the mouse left or right. If you see, if I just keep going while I'm holding that down, we're starting to see the car come into frame. That's looking better. So we can now move the camera, translate it up a little bit. So we'll just go up like that, and that's starting to look quite cool. It's a like pretty dope silhouette, GTR silhouette. That already looks dope. But what we're going to need to do is shine some light on the situation. Now the light, if we click on that light, we can see on the X, Y, and Z axis, it's zeroed out, so it's pretty much in the middle of the car. That's why we can't see any light. So if we hold left, click down, and sort of move the light up, and then if we move this back, we can see down here in the light preview, we can see what the light is actually looking at. So right now the light's kind of sitting, 30 points up and 74 pixels, towards us, away from the front of the car. Now the light's looking directly out, so we might want to rotate that light on the x-axis, just down like that, and we can see the light's looking directly at the car. And that looks pretty cool, right? Right, so the next thing we want to do is add let's add a floor. Because right now I've got the car, it's just sort of sitting in 3D space. Now if you want to rotate the car, the model itself, you can actually click. So when you click this, that's just the preview. That's just so you can get a good look around the model without affecting the actual render or what it's showing on screen. So we untick that again and zoom out. And while we've got this selected and go up to our parameters tab, you'll see on the X, the Y, and the Z axis, if we rotate on the Y axis, you can see you can spin the car around. So right now, just with only 4 or 5 nodes, we're able to, render a 3D object that we've, sort of found on the internet and make all sorts of cool things, You get so much freedom. So the next thing I think we'll do is add a floor. That's right. Now, in order to add a floor, we're going to want to add if we right click, go add operator, we want to add a grid. So we click that, I'll chuck a grid in there. Now we want to go up to the parameters tab, change the orientation to ZX. Cool. And we'll change the size to say 1000 by 1000. And then what we want to do is right click on the end of that grid and choose geometry. So we're going to create a piece of geometry out of that grid. And there we go, there's our floor. Just like that. It's pretty cool, right? So now I think we should position the car and the lights. So I think first of all I'll position the camera. Now a good little trick when you're trying to position the camera, rather than just using guesswork to try and figure out, oh, where do I want this, you can actually tell the camera to look at something, right? So no matter where you move the camera, it'll always sort of target or focus on this particular point. So a really handy trick for that is adding an operator, go to this comp panel and choose null. And chuck that just to the right of the camera. And then you want to select the camera, and over here in the parameters panel, see where it says look at? So you want to drag that null into the look at field. And then you'll see if we, I'll just set that to 10, set that to about 75. So this is the camera. And what we can actually do is when we move this null up and down, or side to side, you're sort of moving this invisible object in 3D space, and the camera's focusing on it. So you can do the same thing if you just want the camera to focus on this piece of geometry. You could drag that in there, and that way it's looking at the car, and then you can move the car around and the camera will sort of follow. But the reason we use a null, so I'll change that back to a null, the reason we use that is so that we've got, you might not want, when you use the 3D model as the look at sort of object, it's using the exact center of that 3D model to look at. So this, by using a null, it gives us the freedom to move that sort of center point around, right? So we'll just set that null to, we'll zero that out, we'll change it to 3 in the y-axis. So we'll just bring it up from the ground a bit. We've got the floor. The next thing I think we want to do is, let's add a little bit of animation. So we want the camera, it was quite cool when the camera was kind of moving while being focused on that null, but we want to kind of automate it so it, so it's nice and smooth. So the trick to doing that is simply going to adding an operator, go to the channel operators, type LFO, and then press enter. So this kind of creates this like I forgot what LFO stands for. Better look that up. Low frequency, something LFO. Low frequency oscillation. There you go. Should have known that. But you see how it's going really sort of fast side to side. We want to slow that down a bit, slow the frequency down. So over here in the parameters panel, we'll change that to 0.01, for example. And then we're going to, on the right of that LFO, we're going to add a math chop. And then we're going to add a null chop on the end of that. So you can see in this LFO chop here, it's going from minus all the way to -1, and it goes all the way to +1 again. So -1 + 1, -1 + 1. What we want to do is go into this math chop and choose up in the parameters panel, hit range, and change the from range to -1. This is really important when you're working with LFOs. Then we want to tab across a couple times, and we want to change the range. So we're taking from range is, we want to go from -1 on the LFO, that goes from -1 to +1, and then we want to change that range to -15 and +15. So it's taking that -1 to +1, running it through this math chop, and out the other side we're getting -15 +15. So then you want to hit this little viewer active button on the right hand side of the null, and then you want to click on the camera and run your mouse over this operator, the chop here, and you want to drag that green thing into the translate X on the camera parameter, and then you want to hit relative chop reference, and you can see already that in this translate window, or in this field, it's now running from -15 to +15. So we get this really cool, so the camera's moving along the x-axis, left and right, essentially, but it's focusing on this null, this one point here. And that kind of gives us this really cool, sort of panning effect. So that's coming together quite well. It's looking really nice, actually. So the next thing I think we're going to do is change the position of the car. So click on the 3D object, and then change the translate to 0, and tab through to the rotate and change that to -30. That looks better. And then click on the light, click on the light, I guess, and then change the translate in the parameters to -15, say 30 and 60. Rotate, we'll go -24, and then -10, and hit enter. And the next thing we want to do is have the light looking at no, we'll leave the light there for now. The next thing we want to do is go to shadows on the light parameters and change the shadow type to soft 2D max, and then down here in the shadow resolution we want to increase that a little bit, because you'll see if I move this light, so we can see the shadow so you can see the lights shining on this angle down towards the car, and if we move that light left or right, it sort of moves that shadow. But if you see down here, the shadow, it's kind of it's not a very high resolution. So if we go to the shadows panel and double that to 2048, whoa, yeah, that kind of makes it look a little bit better. Now, if you are running the pro or commercial version of TouchDesigner, you can click on this render top and go to common on the right hand side of the parameters, and you should be able to change the resolution to something slightly higher. So you can work in 4K, or you can go 1920 by 1080, but if you're just using the demo version, you're unfortunately limited to 1280 by 720. Now, it's not too bad, it's still pretty workable, but if you really want to pump out some sort of really high res stuff, or you're doing projection mapping on, large surfaces, you're going to want to buy the commercial version. And you can see when I increase the resolution, down here we've sort of lost those jaggies, so it looks quite nice, quite a lot nicer. Right, that's looking good. Another fun little trick is if you right click anywhere in the network editor and go to display, and then if you click show network editor grid, you can turn that off so you can it's a bit cleaner and you can work and sort of see what you're working on a bit nicer. But I'm going to turn that back on for now. Right. So we've got the 3D model. We've created a floor using the grid, and we've piped it into a geometry comp. If we click this render top here, we can see it's rendering camera 1. It's rendering all the geometry in the network and all of the lights. There's only one piece of geometry and one light at the moment, but anytime you use star, it's like the wild card, so it will use everything. It's looking really good. So the next thing I think we'll do is add a background, because you can see here in the background it's all transparent. So let's right click on that null and let's add an over, just like the last tutorial. And then we're going to right click down here and add a constant. So if we drag that into the over, you can see here, it's not looking too good, is it? So if we click on that over and we change the fixed layer to input 1, and there we go. All running real time, no rendering, no wait time, all the fun. So you can see how I've got the 2 display buttons ticked on here. So it's displaying both. We don't need both. We just need the one we're working on. And at the end of that, we're going to go null, chuck a null on. We're going to render out the final sort of object in our scene. So it's sort of following the path. That was quite cool with the white background. But what I might do is change the constant. So if we click on the constant in the parameters, we'll change that to like, and 0.6 maybe. There we go. And the other cool thing, what you can kind of do is change the light color. So if we go into hit our light, go into the light panel, the parameters, we'll just use that exact same RGB value for the light color. So 0.5 tab 0.6 tab 1. And that's looking really nice. So I think the final thing, just to give it a bit more of a bit of a softer feel, less sort of digital, but more organic, I guess, is if you click on cam and then go up to the settings in the parameter panel and choose fog linear. So you can see that's obviously a bit too much. Let's change the color of that fog to 0.5, 0.6, and 1, same as our light. Now all we need to do is move the fog far slider all the way over there, and we'll just drag the fog near, sort of to about there, let's say. The final thing we need to do is change this background color in the camera settings just above the fog, which is the same color we used before. 0.5, 0.6, and 1. And the alpha channel needs to be 1. And there we have it. A really, really tidy looking render. So I'll show you, I'll remind you guys how to sort of dump that out as a video as well. So you just right click on the final null, choose movie file out, and I think we'll choose we'll do an image to start off with. We'll call this TouchDesigner importing FBX, like a YouTube cover. So we'll change the image file type to JPEG. We'll let that rotate around a little bit more. Maybe something about there. Another little trick is you can hit the pause button down here, hit record once, untick it, and then we should have our YouTube cover, just like that. And the same thing if we want to do a movie, choose movie, choose where you want to save that movie, change the video codec to MP4. You can do this at 60 frames or 30, but I'm just going to leave it 30 for now. Choose record and then hit play. It's going to record a cool little animation. So we'll untick that. There's our video. Look at that. Too easy. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to get the project file, I'm going to be putting the project file on my Patreon. Patreon link will be in the description. And yeah, until next time.